So we saw this blockbuster debut of spot Bitcoin ETFs. They launched in January. You guys are in the lead. Talk to me about how you feel about the launch and how it's gone in the last 7 months.
Yeah, well, obviously we've been pleased with how the iShares Bitcoin Trust has done. We had high expectations for the level of client demand that we would see, given over many years we'd had clients expressed interest in being able to access Bitcoin in an accessible, convenient way. But I would say this even exceeded our rather high expectations for it.
And you surpassed Grayscale in May, still maintaining that lead at this point. What's next for you guys on the spot Bitcoin ETF front? Just keep riding this wave, or are looking to get wealth managers to make a portfolio allocation recommendation?
Yeah, well, it's still very early actually in the client adoption journey, which is interesting, even with all the success that it's had. If you think about our 3 segments across iShares being really end investors, wealth advisory, and institutions, that first channel right out of the gates came on very, very strong. And that was everything from small dollar retail to ultra high net worth with very large positions. But when we talk about wealth advisory or institutions, we're still very early days. Institutions are on an education, diligence, research journey. We're playing a big part in helping them through that. And wealth advisory, typically it takes multiple years on some of the biggest platforms to get approval for new ETFs. Many of our large partners there are accelerating their efforts to go through that approval process, but they're still not there yet. So there's actually a long way to go in terms of our client journey.
I've been speaking with some of the other issuers about exactly that and this due diligence window, and they say that the most aggressive of those that are going through this process right now say that it could be 3 to 6 months. Does that just seem overly ambitious? What's a more realistic expectation for how long it might be until these recommendations can be made?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, we're 6 months in now since the Bitcoin ETFs launched. We're 2 days in since the Ethereum ETFs launched. As I said, normal timeline would be multiple years. Those have been expedited by a bunch of firms, so could it happen this year? Certainly it could.
Why do you think your product is resonating over some of the others that are out there?
Yeah, well, certainly investors have been resoundingly choosing IBIT for Bitcoin access, and I think that comes from a combination of us being both obviously a leading player, the number 1 leading player in ETF markets globally, plus the capabilities that we marry that with in terms of digital asset space, having built, starting in 2021, Coinbase Prime capabilities into our Aladdin investment system that allowed this product to run on the same operating and risk platform that the other 1,300 plus iShares ETFs globally do.
So you mentioned that Tuesday we saw the launch of spot Ether ETFs here in the US. And my question is, the SEC is not comfortable with having the Ether that lives in an ETF be staked. And to me, that's what a lot of investors find is one of the most appealing aspects of having exposure to Ether, that you're earning this yield on that investment. What do you think? Is that going to be a headwind for adoption, or is it just a matter of time until the SEC gets on board with staking? I'm just trying to work out the calculus here of why somebody would park money in a spot Ether ETF when they're missing out on this huge perk.
Yeah. Well, staking is an interesting feature of Ethereum and other proof-of-stake blockchains, but it's not something that's universally done by any stretch, even before these ETFs existed. When you look at all the supply of Ether today, only about 29% of that is actually staked today. So certainly existing investors, many of them are staking, but even a larger majority are not.
Now, when BlackRock put in an application last summer, it was this seismic shift in the conversation, because up until then, it was unclear where the SEC was going to land on this. It seemed to be this really helpful push when BlackRock joined the group of applicants. And my question to you is, how did you get BlackRock comfortable with this kind of investment?
Well, I think if you look at our journey in digital assets across multiple years, we were building towards this moment. And if you think of, as I mentioned, that partnership with Coinbase to build the technological capabilities around crypto trading and custody support, the launch of our Bitcoin private trust in 2022, the partnership we have with Circle on the stablecoin front, the work we've done in tokenization, all those things were in response to technology transformation that was happening in the ecosystem, plus client demand that existed for access solutions. The Bitcoin ETF was a very logical progression of that.
Are you planning other digital asset offerings?
Well, if you think about where our clients are today, they are overwhelmingly most interested in Bitcoin, certainly some significant interest in Ether as well, and very little beyond that in sort of the long tail of crypto assets that exist. And so for now, this is certainly where we are. In time, maybe some of those smaller assets grow to a point where they would be fit for purpose, but there's a pretty big gap today between Bitcoin, then ETH, then everything else in terms of liquidity, track record, maturity, et cetera.
There's this perception that Wall Street was really staying on the sidelines until they could get hard and fast rules from Congress, and we're starting to see some progress there, but nothing has made it to the finish line in terms of being signed into law. A lot of the conversations that I'm having on the ground here keep coming back to politics and how excited people are that crypto has become such a big part of the conversation in this presidential election cycle. Donald Trump is headlining Bitcoin 2024 this Saturday in Nashville, holding a big fundraiser. How important is it that crypto has become a part of the conversation in this 2024 election?
Well, I think it is a necessary conversation to be had from a legislative and regulatory framework in terms of building out a regulatory construct that supports innovation happening here in the U.S. And puts the appropriate guardrails around it. And I think the biggest thing that we've seen in 24 is that this not only is being viewed as a more legitimate and important issue, but that transformation has actually become now bipartisan in nature.